They said Silas Thorne died 10 years ago at the Battle of Sharpsburg. They were wrong. The man who came back to the Arizona Territory was just a husk, a walking ghost who buried his guns and locked his soul in a box of whiskey and regret. He swore he'd never let another living soul close enough to hurt him. He thought he was safe in his solitude. He was wrong. Because on the stormiest night of 1881, destiny didn't knock politely. It kicked down his door in the form of a desperate Apache widow holding a secret that would shatter his world. This is the story of a heart turned to stone and the woman who risked everything to make it beat again. But be warned, in the Wild West, redemption always comes paid in blood. The Arizona Territory didn't just reign, it tried to drown you. Silas Thorne sat in the dark, the only light coming from the dying embers of a mesquite fire. In his hand, a glass of cheap whiskey trembled, not from fear, but from the memories that grew louder when the thunder rolled. Outside, the wind screamed through Whispering Canyon, a sound that usually comforted him. It meant no one was foolish enough to be out there. It meant he was alone. Silas liked alone. Alone was safe. Alone didn't betray you. Alone didn't die in your arms. He was 40 years old, but his eyes looked 100. He was a man made of rawhide and scar tissue, living on a desolate patch of land 10 miles north of Silver Creek. The locals whispered about him. They called him the Grey Wolf. They said he had killed 10 men in a saloon brawl in Abilene. They said he had a fortune in Confederate gold buried under his floorboards. None of it was true. The truth was far more boring and far more painful. Silas was just a man who had lost his wife, Abigail, and their unborn daughter to a fever a decade ago, and he had been punishing himself for surviving ever since. He raised the glass to his lips, but his hand froze. His dog, a 3-legged mongrel named Buster, lifted his head from the rug and growled. It wasn't a playful growl. It was the low, guttural vibration that meant threat. Silas set the glass down. He didn't reach for the whiskey bottle. He reached for the Colt Navy revolver resting on the table. Thump! Something heavy hit the front door, not the wind. Silas thumbed the hammer back. The click echoed loudly in the small cabin. He stood up, his joints popping, and moved silently to the side of the door. "If you're looking to rob me," Silas called out, his voice like gravel grinding together, "you'll find lead is the only currency I have plenty of." No answer, just the drumming of the rain. Then a voice, faint, desperate, and undeniably female. "Open, please." Silas frowned. A woman? Out here, in this hell? It was a trick. It had to be. Bushwhackers often used women as bait. "Git," Silas growled. "I don't know who sent you, but I ain't buying." "No one sent me." The voice cracked, weaker this time. "The water. It rises. Please." Silas cursed under his breath. He was a hard man, but leaving a woman to drown in a flash flood wasn't in his nature, no matter how much he wanted it to be. He holstered the gun, but kept his hand near it. He threw the latch and kicked the door open. The wind violently blew rain into the room, soaking the floorboards instantly. She was collapsed on his porch, a heap of sodden buckskin and dark hair. She looked small, frail, but as Silas stepped forward to grab her arm, he saw the markings on her clothing, the beadwork, the moccasins. She was Apache. In 1881, in this part of the territory, an Apache on a white man's porch usually resulted in a gunshot, no questions asked. The tensions were high. General Crook was sweeping the mountains. Silas stiffened. "You got a death wish, girl?" She looked up. Her face was streaked with mud and rain, her black hair plastered to her skull. Her eyes were dark, terrified, but fierce, and she was clutching a bundle to her chest so tight her knuckles were white. The creek, she gasped, shivering violently. It took my horse. Silas looked past her. The dry wash that ran near his cabin was now a raging torrent of brown water. She wasn't lying. If she stayed on the porch, the cold would kill her before morning. "Get in," he barked, pulling her up by the arm. She was lighter than he expected. He slammed the door shut against the storm and dragged her toward the fire. She sank to the floor, curling her body around the bundle in her arms. "Don't touch anything," Silas ordered. He went to the corner and grabbed a rough wool blanket, throwing it at her. "Dry off, then get out when the rain stops." She didn't move to take the blanket. Instead, she began to peel back the wet layers of the bundle she was holding. Silas watched, his hand still hovering near his gun. "What is that? Stolen goods?" She looked at him, her dark eyes locking onto his blue ones. There was a challenge in her gaze that unsettled him. She pulled back the final fold of the wet cloth to reveal a face, a baby, no more than 6 months old. The child was silent, its face pale, eyes wide and unblinking. It was wrapped in a mixture of army-issue wool and Apache deerskin. Silas felt a cold spike in his chest. A baby. He hadn't been this close to an infant since Abigail. "It's sick," Silas said, stepping back involuntarily. "He is cold," the woman corrected. Her English was broken but clear. She stripped the wet clothes off the child and wrapped him in the dry wool blanket Silas had thrown. "He needs fire." Silas watched them for a long moment. He should throw them out. Harboring an Apache was illegal. If the cavalry patrol from Fort Verde came by, he'd be branded a traitor. If the local ruffians found out, they'd burn his cabin down. "Who are you?" Silas asked. "I am Nellie," she said. She didn't look down. "Widow of Geronimo's lieutenant, Chayton." Silas let out a sharp breath. Chayton. The man was a legend and a nightmare in these parts. He had led raids that burned half of Maricopa County, and he had been killed by the U.S. cavalry 3 months ago. "You're Chayton's squaw?" Silas whispered. "You realize if I drag you to Silver Creek right now, there's a $500 bounty on his family? Dead or alive?" Gnarly didn't flinch. She rocked the baby. "I know." "Then why come here? Why my door?" Nellie looked around the stark, empty cabin. She looked at the dust, the empty whiskey bottles, the gun on the table. Then she looked back at him. "Because they say Silas Thorne has no heart," she said softly. "A man with no heart cannot hate." Silas stared at her. "You think I won't turn you in?" "I think you are tired, Silas Thorne," she said. She stood up, the baby bundled in one arm. She was taller than she looked on the floor. "I have seen you in town. I have seen how you look at the world. You want to die, but you are too strong to let yourself." The accuracy of her words hit him like a physical blow. "Watch your tongue." "I have a proposition," she said. "I don't make deals with—" "Look at him," she interrupted, stepping forward and thrusting the bundle toward him. "Look at his eyes." Silas flinched but looked. The baby, warming up now, let out a small whimper. Silas looked at the child's face. The skin was bronzed, yes. The hair was black. But the eyes. The baby had bright, piercing blue eyes, just like Silas. "He is half-blood," Nellie said. "His father was Chayton, but his mother was white. I am his aunt. I raised him since his mother died in childbirth." "You said you were the widow." Silas narrowed his eyes. "I am Chayton's widow. This was his son by his second wife, a captive woman." Gnarly took a deep breath. "The Apache want to kill him because he has white blood. The white soldiers want to kill him because he is Chayton's son. He has nowhere. I have nowhere." The thunder clapped directly overhead, shaking the floorboards. "I am not a nursery maid," Silas said coldly, and I ain't a savior." Nellie stepped closer. The firelight danced on her high cheekbones. "I do not want a savior. I need a husband." The silence in the room was deafening. "Excuse me?" Silas choked out. "Not for love," she said quickly, her voice hard. "For the law. A white man's wife cannot be touched by the soldiers without a trial. If I am your wife, and he is your son, we are safe." "You're out of your mind." Silas turned away. "Get out." "Do you want me and my baby?" she asked, her voice ringing clear. "Or do you want to be the man who let a child die because he was too afraid of the living?" Silas didn't sleep that night. He sat in his rocking chair, the Colt Navy in his lap, watching the woman and the child sleep by his hearth. She had passed out from exhaustion minutes after her insane proposal. The baby, miraculously, had slept through the night, warmed by the fire and the dry blanket. Silas stared at the flames. Husband. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. He remembered Abigail, the smell of her lavender water, the way she hummed when she cooked. Marrying this Apache woman, this stranger, felt like spitting on Abigail's grave. But then his eyes drifted to the boy, the half-breed, as the town would call him. Blue eyes, innocent, hunted by both sides. Silas knew what it felt like to be hunted. He had ridden with Quantrill's raiders during the war, a mistake that still haunted his dreams. He knew the look of a man, or a child, who had no place left to run. If I turn them out, Silas thought, they die within 2 days. Either the elements get them, or the scalp hunters do. Morning broke with a harsh, grey light. The rain had stopped, leaving the world muddy and raw. Gnarly woke with a start, her hand instantly going to a knife concealed in her belt. When she saw Silas sitting in the chair, watching her, she relaxed slightly, but kept her hand on the hilt. "Coffee," Silas said, gesturing to a tin pot on the stove. "Black. Bitter. Like everything else in this house." Gnarly sat up, adjusting her dress. "Did you decide?" "I decided you're crazy," Silas grunted. "Marriage ain't a simple thing, woman. It's a legal document. It's a life sentence." "It is a shield," she countered. She poured a cup of coffee and drank it despite the heat. She was tough, he gave her that. "I can work, I can cook, I can track, I can break horses better than you. I see your corral. Your horses are wild, your fence is broken. You are one man trying to run a spread that needs 3. "I manage," Silas snapped. "You survive," she corrected. "You do not live." Before Silas could retort, the sound of hoofbeats thundered in the yard. Silas was on his feet in a second, moving to the window. He peered through the crack in the shutter. 3 riders. Dusters. Winchesters scabbarded. It was Elias Dutch Kincaid and 2 of his boys. Dutch was a land grabber. He had been trying to buy Silas's land for pennies on the dollar for 2 years. He wanted the water rights to the creek. He was a snake in a fancy hat. "Hide," Silas ordered Nellie. "Under the floorboards in the pantry. Now." "I will not hide like a rat," she hissed. "You will if you want that boy to keep breathing." Silas grabbed her arm, his grip iron hard. "Dutch Kincaid would shoot that baby just to see if he bounces. Get down." Gnarly saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for the child. She nodded once, grabbed the baby, and hurried to the pantry. Silas kicked the rug over the trap door, just as a fist pounded on the front door. "Silas! Open up, you miserable hermit!" Dutch's voice boomed. Silas opened the door, leaning casually against the frame. "You're trespassing, Dutch. Again." Dutch Kincaid was a large man with a red beard and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He sat atop a massive bay horse, flanked by 2 gunmen, weary-looking types with itchy fingers. Just being neighborly, Silas. Dutch grinned. Saw the storm last night. Wondered if your roof caved in. Or if you finally decided to sell. Roof's fine. Answer's no, Silas said flatly. Dutch leaned forward on his saddle horn. You know, the railroad is coming through Silver Creek. Land prices are gonna skyrocket. But not for you. Not if you have an accident. Is that a threat? It's a weather forecast. Dutch laughed. Then he sniffed the air. He frowned. I smell lavender. And milk? Silas's heart hammered against his ribs. The baby. The smell of the baby. I got a goat, Silas lied smoothly. Old nanny goat wandered in from the storm. Dutch's eyes narrowed. He scanned the porch. He saw the mud. He saw the faint, smaller footprint near the door that the rain hadn't quite washed away. Small feet for a goat, Dutch murmured. He looked at his men. Boys, why don't you go check Mr. Thorne's barn? See if he's hiding any stray livestock. They stay on their horses. Silas leveled his Colt at Dutch's chest. The movement was a blur, so fast Dutch didn't even have time to blink. First man who touches the ground gets buried in it. The air crackled with tension. The two gunmen reached for their weapons, but Dutch held up a hand. He looked at the barrel of Silas's gun, steady as a rock. Easy, Silas, Dutch chuckled, though his face was red. You're touchy today. Must be the loneliness getting to you. Dutch pulled on his reins, turning his horse. We'll be back, Silas. And next time, I won't be asking nicely. Rumor is there's Apache raiding parties moving south. Be a shame if they burned you out. People would just blame the savages. Dutch spat on the ground and galloped off, his men following. Silas watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. His hand was shaking now, not from fear of Dutch, but from the adrenaline. He had almost killed 3 men. He was ready to die to protect a woman and child he didn't even know. He walked back inside and pulled the rug back. Gnarly climbed out, the baby silent in her arms. They will come back, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Silas holstered his gun. They will. He walked to the fireplace and picked up a shovel. What are you doing? Gnarly asked. If we're gonna do this, Silas said, turning to face her, his eyes cold and resolved. We do it right. Put the boy down. You said you can work. Start by boarding up that back window. We're going into town tomorrow. Gnarly blinked. Town? They will kill us. No, Silas said. We're going to see the preacher. You wanted a marriage? You got one. But understand this. Nearly. He stepped close to her, towering over her. This ain't a romance. It's a war pact. You watch my back, I watch the boys. But the moment you lie to me, the moment you bring danger I didn't ask for, the deal is off. Gnarly looked at him, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. Deal, husband. The wagon ride to Silver Creek was a funeral procession in all but name. Silas drove the buckboard, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Gnarly sat beside him, rigid as a board. She wore an old calico dress Silas had found in a trunk. Abigail's dress. It was too loose in the shoulders and too tight in the chest, and seeing her in it made Silas's stomach turn with a mixture of grief and guilt. But Nellie wore it like armor. She had braided her hair differently, trying to look less savage and more like a homesteader's wife. But there was no hiding the fierce darkness of her eyes or the bronze of her skin. The baby, whom Gnarly called Liwanu, growling bear, was hidden beneath a shawl in her lap. Keep his face covered, Silas muttered, as the town limits came into view. Folks here fear what they don't understand, and they hate what they fear. Silver Creek was a festering wound of a town, built on silver dust and bad intentions. As the wagon rolled down Main Street, the clamor of the blacksmith and the rinky-dink piano from the Bucket of Blood saloon died down. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Silas felt the eyes on them. He felt the judgment crawling over his skin like ants. "Don't look at them," Silas ordered under his breath. "Look at the horse's ears." "They look at me like a wolf in the sheep pen," Nellie whispered, her voice steady. "You are a wolf," Silas replied. "Just don't show them your teeth yet." They pulled up in front of the small, whitewashed church. It was Sunday, but the service was long over. Reverend Josiah Miller was on the porch, shaking out a rug. He was a thin man with spectacles and a Bible that looked more battered than Silas's conscience. When he saw Silas climbing down, Miller smiled, until he saw Nellie. The smile vanished like water on a hot skillet. "Silas," Miller nodded cautiously. "It's been 3 years since you set foot here." "Preacher," Silas grunted, tying the reins. He walked around and offered a hand to Nellie. She hesitated, then took it. Her grip was calloused and strong. "I need you to open the book." Miller blinked. "The good book?" "The registry," Silas corrected. "We're getting married." The sound of a glass shattering echoed from the saloon across the street. A crowd was beginning to form on the boardwalks. Men with hands on their belts, women whispering behind fans. Miller looked from Silas to Nellie, and then to the bundle in her arms. "Silas, surely you jest. This woman she is of the tribes. The law isn't explicitly against it. But the town didn't fight at Antietam," Silas snapped, his voice rising so the onlookers could hear. "The town didn't pull me out of the mud when I was bleeding out. I don't answer to the town, Josiah. I answer to God and the governor. Now, do you have a license, or do I have to ride to Prescott?" Miller swallowed hard. He saw the look in Silas's eyes, the look of a man who had pushed all his chips into the center of the table. "Come inside," Miller whispered. The ceremony was short, dry, and joyless. There were no flowers, no rings. Silas used a brass washer from his saddlebag as a temporary ring. When Miller pronounced them man and wife, the words hung in the empty church like a curse. As they turned to leave, the church doors swung open. Blocking the light was Sheriff Amos Gentry. Behind him stood Dutch Kincaid, picking his teeth with a splinter of wood, looking smug. "Well, well," the sheriff drawled. He was a good man once, but the silver boom had bought his loyalty cheap. "Dutch told me you were bringing a squaw into town, Silas." I said, "No, Silas Thorne has more sense than that." "Her name is Mrs. Thorne," Silas said, his hand resting casually on the butt of his Navy Colt. "And you'll address her as such." Dutch laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Mrs. Thorne, you hear that, boys? Silas married the enemy. Tell me, Silas, does she scalp you before or after she cooks dinner?" The deputies chuckled. Nellie stiffened, her hand moving toward the hidden knife in her sash, but Silas squeezed her shoulder, a warning. "She's my wife, Sheriff," Silas said, ignoring Dutch. "That makes her a citizen, and it makes that boy in her arms my son. Anyone who bothers them answers to me. And you know, I don't shoot to wound." Sheriff Gentry looked at Silas. He remembered the stories. He remembered the bodies in Abilene. He sighed, hitching up his belt. "It's a free country, Silas," Gentry said. "But you're stirring a hornet's nest. Folks around here lost family to the Apache. They won't take kindly to this." "They don't have to like it," Silas said, guiding Nellie past the lawman. "They just have to survive it." They walked the gauntlet back to the wagon. Someone spat in the dust near Nellie's feet. A woman hissed, "Traitor!" Nellie held her head high, her eyes fixed on the horizon, but Silas saw a single tear track through the dust on her cheek. As Silas climbed onto the buckboard, Dutch Kincaid stepped close to the wheel. He lowered his voice so only Silas could hear. "You think a piece of paper protects you?" Dutch whispered. "I sent a telegram to Tombstone yesterday. I got friends riding with Curly Bill Brocious. Real hard men. They don't care about marriage licenses. They just care about gold. And I told them you're sitting on a mine." Silas froze. Curly Bill, the leader of the cowboys. If Dutch had brought that kind of heat down on them, this wasn't just a land dispute anymore. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. "You bring the cowboys here, Dutch," Silas said softly, "and I'll make sure you're the first one they bury." Silas snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward, leaving the hate of Silver Creek behind them. But as they rode back toward the canyon, the silence between them was heavier than before. They were legally bound now, but the target on their backs had just grown 10 times larger. The first week of marriage was a study in tension. The cabin, once a tomb of silence, was now filled with the sounds of life. And it drove Silas mad. The baby cried at odd hours. The smell of Naley's cooking, strange stews made of roots and rabbit, replaced the smell of dust and whiskey. They slept separately. Silas took the loft. Naley took the main floor near the hearth, the baby always within arm's reach. But as the days passed, Silas noticed things. He noticed how Gnarly fixed the corral fence that had been broken for 2 years, using rawhide lashings that were stronger than nails. He noticed how she quieted the horses with a whisper, animals that usually tried to bite Silas. One evening, Silas sat on the porch, cleaning his Winchester. Naley sat nearby, mending one of his shirts. "The boy needs a name," Silas said abruptly. "A white name, if he's to pass." Gnarly paused, the needle hovering. "His name is Liwanu." "Liwanu won't get him a job in a bank, or a seat in a schoolhouse," Silas said. "If we're playing this charade, we play it all the way." Gnarly looked at the baby sleeping in a basket. "What do you suggest? Silas Jr.? "No," Silas said quickly. "No, how about Samuel, after my brother? He was a stubborn fool, but he had a good heart." Gnarly tasted the name. "Samuel. Sam." She nodded slowly. "It is a strong name. He will be Sam." It was the first time they had agreed on anything without a fight. Later that night, the truce ended. Silas woke to the sound of Buster barking, a sharp, frantic yelp that was suddenly cut short. Silas was out of bed and grabbing his rifle before his eyes were fully open. He dropped from the loft, landing silently in his bare feet. "Naley," he hissed. She was already awake, crouching by the window. The baby moved into the corner behind the heavy oak table. She had a knife in one hand and Silas's spare scattergun in the other. "3 men," she whispered. "Coming from the creek bed." "Dutch?" "No," she said, sniffing the air. "They move too quiet for white men. They move like smoke." Silas's blood ran cold. "Apache." "They found us," Naley said, her voice trembling for the first time. "They want the boy." "Why?" Silas demanded, creeping to the other window. "He's a half-breed. Why risk a raid for a baby?" "Because of what he wears," Gnarly said. "The amulet around his neck. It belonged to Cochise. Chayton stole it. Whoever holds the amulet holds the claim to lead the renegade bands in the Sierra Madre." Silas cursed. "You forgot to mention the kid is royalty? You would not have let us in," she retorted. "Fair point." A shadow moved across the moonlight in the yard. An arrow thudded into the doorframe, inches from where Silas had been standing a second before. "Get down," Silas roared. He shattered the window with the butt of his rifle and fired blindly into the darkness. The crack of the Winchester split the night. A return volley of gunfire erupted from the tree line. Bullets chewed up the wood of the cabin. A lantern shattered, spilling oil but thankfully not lighting. "Cover the back," Silas yelled. Gnarly didn't need telling. She was already at the rear window. She didn't fire the shotgun immediately. She waited. Silas watched her out of the corner of his eye. She was calm, calculating. Suddenly, the back door creaked. Someone was trying to pry it open. Nellie leveled the scattergun and pulled both triggers. The boom was deafening in the small space. A scream of agony came from the other side of the door, followed by the sound of a body hitting the mud. "One down!" she yelled, reloading with practiced speed. "Two in the front!" Silas pumped the lever of his rifle. Clack-bang, clack-bang. He saw a muzzle flash near the well and fired at it. A man spun and fell. Then, silence. The shooting stopped as quickly as it began. The wind howled through the broken windows. "Are they gone?" Silas whispered, his ears ringing. "No," Nellie said, her eyes scanning the dark. "They are testing us, seeing how many guns we have." Silas looked at her. Her face was cut by a shard of glass, bleeding freely, but she didn't seem to notice. She looked like a warrior queen in a calico dress. "We can't stay here," Silas said. "If they know we have the boy, they'll bring more. And if Dutch brings his cowboys, we are trapped," Gnarly said. "Not yet," Silas said. He moved to the loose floorboard under his bed, the one everyone thought hid gold. He pried it up. There was no gold, just a long, wooden crate wrapped in oilcloth. Silas pulled it out and opened it. Inside lay a Sharps 1874 Buffalo rifle, a weapon designed to kill at 1,000 yards, and 2 boxes of dynamite he had saved from his mining days. "You know how to use dynamite?" Silas asked. Nellie looked at the red sticks. "I can learn." "Good." Silas stood up, the heavy rifle in his hands. "Because we ain't running. This is my land, and if they want it, or the boy, they're gonna have to pay for every inch in blood." He looked at Gnarly, and for the first time, he saw her not as a burden, but as a partner. "Bind that cut on your face, Mrs. Thorne," Silas said. "We have a long night ahead." Just then, a voice called out from the darkness beyond the tree line. It wasn't an Apache dialect. It was English, smooth and cultured. "Silas Thorne, you're a hard man to kill. But I haven't come for your life. I've come for the property of the United States government you're harboring." Silas froze. He looked at Nellie. "That's not Apache," Silas whispered. "That's a Hessian, a mercenary." The voice spoke again. "Send out the woman and the child, and you can go back to your whiskey. Refuse, and we burn it all down." Silas walked to the window. "Who are you?" he shouted. "Captain Marcus Sterling," the voice replied, "formerly of the Confederacy, currently employed by interested parties." Silas's face went pale. He knew that name. Sterling was a butcher, a man who hunted humans for sport. "Dutch didn't send him," Silas said, turning to Gnarly. "And the Apache didn't send him." "Then who?" Gnarly asked, clutching the baby. "Someone who knows about the amulet," Silas said grimly. "Someone powerful." He handed Gnarly a stick of dynamite and a match. "When I give the signal," Silas said, "light it and throw it as far as you can." "What is the signal?" Silas cocked the hammer of the Sharps rifle. "When you hear the devil scream." The darkness outside was absolute, save for the muzzle flashes that occasionally popped like fireflies in the tree line. Silas lay prone on the floorboards, the heavy barrel of the Sharps buffalo rifle resting on the windowsill. The weapon was a cannon, capable of dropping a bison at 1,000 yards. At 50 yards it would punch through a tree trunk and the man hiding behind it. "He's counting down," Nellie whispered from the shadows. She held the stick of dynamite, her hand steady, though her breathing was shallow. 10. Sterling's voice drifted from the dark, calm and cultured. 9. "He thinks we're scared," Silas murmured, sighting down the long brass scope. "He thinks we're huddled in the corner, praying." "Are we not?" Nally asked. No. Silas pulled the hammer back. It made a heavy mechanical click. We're hunting. 5, 4. Silas saw movement, a shadow detaching itself from the large oak tree near the creek. A man running low, carrying a torch. They were going to burn them out before they even breached the door. Now! Silas roared. Nally struck the match against the rough stone of the hearth. The fuse hissed, sparking violently. She counted to 3, just as Silas had taught her in the brief moments before the siege, and hurled the stick through the shattered back window. At the same moment, Silas squeezed the trigger of the sharps. The rifle kicked like a mule against his shoulder. The boom was thunderous, drowning out the storm outside. The man with the torch spun violently, the heavy .50 caliber slug catching him mid-stride. He dropped the torch into the dry brush. Then the dynamite went off. Crack boom. The earth shook. A geyser of dirt, wood, and smoke erupted in the backyard. Screams followed, men shouting in confusion, horses panicking. Move! Silas commanded. He grabbed the second box of dynamite and his bandolier. Nodley scooped up little Sam, wrapping her shawl tight around his head to muffle the noise. They didn't go out the back. That's what Sterling would expect. Instead, Silas kicked the trap door to the root cellar open. Down, he ordered. The tunnel comes out in the barn. It was an old escape route, dug by the original prospector who built the cabin, fearful of Comanche raids. It was narrow, smelling of wet earth and rotting potatoes. Nally crawled first, the baby strapped to her chest. Silas followed, dragging the heavy crate of explosives. Above them, the cabin groaned. The torch had done its work. The dry timber of the porch caught fire. The flames roared, eating the only home Silas had known for 10 years. He felt a pang of loss, sharp and sudden. But he shoved it down. The cabin was just wood. The woman and child crawling in the dirt ahead of him. They were flesh and blood. They emerged into the musty darkness of the barn. The horses were stamping nervously in their stalls. Saddle the mare, Silas whispered, moving to the barn doors. He peeked through a crack. The cabin was fully engulfed now. The orange glow illuminated the yard. He saw Sterling's men, hardened mercenaries in long dusters, encircling the burning house, guns raised, waiting for the rats to scurry out. Sterling himself sat on a white horse near the gate, watching the fire with a bored expression. He lit a cigar, the flare illuminating a scar that ran down his left cheek. "They aren't coming out, Captain," one of the men shouted. "They're burning in there." "Silas Thorne doesn't burn," Sterling said quietly, turning his head. His eyes scanned the yard, moving slowly toward the barn. "Check the stables." "Damn!" Silas cursed. He turned to Nally. She had the mare saddled. "Get on," he said. "There is only one horse," she said, realizing the truth. "Silas, the mare can't carry double at a gallop, not with the terrain we're hitting. I'll take the mule." "The mule is lame." "Then I'll stand my ground." Silas checked his revolvers. "Ride for the Devil's Anvil, the Slot Canyons. They can't track you over the stone." "I will not leave you," Nally said furiously. "You aren't leaving me." Silas grabbed her hand. His grip was warm, desperate. "You're leading them away. They want the boy. If they see you ride, they follow. I'll flank them." "You are lying," she whispered, her dark eyes searching his. "Go!" Silas slapped the mare's rump. The horse bolted, crashing through the barn doors and into the firelit yard. Nally rode low, Apache style, practically invisible against the horse's neck. The sudden appearance of the rider startled the mercenaries. "There!" Sterling shouted, pointing his cigar. "Get the girl! Leave the man!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets whizzed past Nally, kicking up dirt around the mare's hooves. She didn't look back. She galloped toward the tree line, disappearing into the dark. Sterling kicked his horse, leading his men in pursuit. Silas watched them go. He was alone in the burning light of his destroyed life. But Sterling had made a mistake. He had left 2 men behind to sift through the ashes and confirm the kill. Silas stepped out of the barn shadow, the Colt Navy in his hand. He wasn't the prey anymore. He walked up behind the first mercenary, who was distracted by the flames. Silas didn't fire. He pistol-whipped the man at the base of the skull. The man folded without a sound. The second man turned, hearing the thud. He raised his rifle, but Silas was faster. He fanned the hammer. Bang! Bang! 2 shots to the chest. Silas stood over the bodies, the heat of the burning cabin searing his back. He looked at the dead mercenary's horse, a strong roan with a U.S. cavalry brand. "Thanks for the loan," Silas grunted. He swung into the saddle, turned the horse toward the dark canyons, and spurred it into a run. He wasn't running away. He was riding to the sound of the guns. The Devil's Anvil was a nightmare landscape of red rock spires and twisting slot canyons, located 20 miles west of Silver Creek. The wind howled through the gaps like tortured souls, masking the sound of hoofbeats. It was here, in a narrow fissure of rock, that Silas found her. Nellie had wedged herself and the mare into a deep crevice. She was shivering, the baby crying softly against her chest. When Silas rode into the moonlight, she nearly shot him. "You are alive," she breathed, lowering the Winchester. Silas slid off the stolen horse. He was covered in soot, and blood soaked his left sleeve, where a stray bullet had grazed him during the escape. "Hard to kill," he rasped, leaning against the cold stone. "But they're close. Sterling is a good tracker. He'll find the sign eventually." "Let me look at your arm," Nellie said, handing the baby to Silas. It was a strange exchange, the hardened gunman holding the infant, while the warrior woman tended the wound. Silas looked down at little Sam. The baby's blue eyes were wide, reflecting the moon. He reached out a tiny hand and grasped Silas's rough, calloused finger. Something inside Silas, that stone heart everyone talked about, cracked a little further. "Why?" Nellie asked, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind his arm. "Why did you come back for us? You could have ridden to Mexico." Silas looked at the canyon walls. 10 years ago, at Sharpsburg, Antietam Creek." Nellie paused, her hands on his arm. "The war." "We were pinned down," Silas said, his voice hollow. "Me and my younger brother, Samuel. The Union artillery was chewing us up. Samuel, he took a hit in the leg. He couldn't run. The order came to retreat." Silas closed his eyes. The memory was as vivid as the canyon around them. "I left him," Silas whispered. "I ran. I told myself I was going to get a medic. But I was running. I left my own blood to die in the mud so I could live. I survived the war, but I died that day." He looked at Nellie. "When you showed up, when you put that boy in my hands, and I gave him the name Samuel." Silas swallowed the lump in his throat. "I ain't leaving Samuel behind again." Nellie tightened the bandage, her touch gentle. She placed a hand on his cheek, turning his face to hers. "You are not a ghost, Silas Thorne," she said fiercely. "A ghost cannot bleed. A ghost cannot love." For a moment, in the freezing wind of the canyon, the distance between them vanished. Silas leaned in and their foreheads touched. It wasn't a kiss. It was something more intimate. A shared breath in the face of death. Crack. A rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls. Stone sprayed near Silas's head. They scrambled back. High up on the ridge, silhouettes appeared against the moon. "Pinned!" Sterling's voice drifted down, amplified by the acoustics of the canyon. "Nowhere to run, Silas. The canyon ends in a drop-off, a mile up." "He's right," Silas said, grabbing his rifle. "Box Canyon, we're dead if we stay." "And dead if we ride," Nellie said. "Not if we change the game," Silas said. He looked at the satchel of dynamite still strapped to his saddle. Nelly, take the boy. Go deeper into the canyon. Find cover. What will you do? I'm going to bring the mountain down, Silas said grimly. He mounted the stolen horse. Go! As Nelly ran with the child, Silas rode out into the center of the canyon floor, exposing himself. Sterling, he shouted, you want the boy? Come get me! He spurred the horse, riding hard toward a narrow archway of a rock that supported the canyon wall. It was a natural choke point. Bullets zipped past him like angry hornets. One struck his horse in the flank, and the beast stumbled, throwing Silas to the hard ground. He hit hard. The wind knocked out of him. He scrambled to his feet, dizzy, grabbing the dynamite satchel. Sterling and his men were riding down the slope now, sensing the kill. There were 10 of them. Silas limped toward the rock arch. He fumbled with a match, his hands shaking. End of the line, Thorn, Sterling yelled, pulling his horse up 20 yards away. He leveled a pistol. Silas lit the fuse. Not for me, Silas grinned, blood on his teeth. He didn't throw the dynamite. He wedged it into a fissure in the archway and turned to run. Bang! Sterling fired. The bullet caught Silas in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell. The fuse burned down. Sterling's eyes widened as he saw the sparks disappear into the rock. Retreat! The explosion was cataclysmic. The dynamite didn't just break the arch, it destabilized the entire canyon wall. Thousands of tons of red sandstone groaned and sheared off. The landslide roared like a dragon. Boulders the size of houses crashed down, separating Silas from the mercenaries. A massive cloud of red dust billowed up, choking the air. Silas crawled away, coughing, dragging himself behind a fallen slab of rock just as the debris settled. Silence returned to the canyon. Silas! He looked up. Gnarly was there, emerging from the dust. She had left the baby in safety and come back. I told you. To go, Silas wheezed, clutching his shoulder. I told you. She knelt beside him, checking his wound. I am your wife. They listened. From behind the wall of fallen rock, there was no sound of horses, no taunts from Sterling. The path was blocked. Did we get them? Nelly asked. Block them, maybe. Silas gritted his teeth as she applied pressure. But Sterling, a cockroach like that don't die easy. We bought time, hours, maybe a day. We have to keep moving, Gnarly said. There is a path up the back wall, an old goat trail. I saw it. Silas tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. He had lost blood. He was exhausted. I can't make the climb, Nelly, he said quietly. You take the boy. Go. No, she said. She grabbed his good arm and pulled it over her shoulder. She was smaller than him, but she possessed the wiry, unbreakable strength of her people. We climbed together. They moved slowly, painfully, up the treacherous trail. As they reached the rim of the canyon, just as the sun began to crest the horizon, they saw it. Waiting for them on the flat mesa wasn't Sterling. It wasn't the cavalry. It was a lone figure sitting on a spotted pony, an Apache warrior, face painted for war, watching them with impassive black eyes, and behind him, rising from the scrub brush, a dozen more. Gnarly froze. Chaitan's brother, she whispered, terrified. Goyathle. The white men called him Geronimo. Silas's hand went to his empty holster. They had escaped the fire and the landslide, only to walk into the hands of the most feared warrior in the West. Geronimo rode forward slowly. He looked at Nelly. Then he looked at the white man leaning on her. Finally, his gaze settled on the bundle in Nelly's arms. You carry the blood of my people, Geronimo said in Apache. Gnarly answered, her voice trembling but proud. I carry the son of Chaitan. Geronimo looked at Silas. And this one? The white eye? He is my husband, Gnarly said. He has bled for this child. Geronimo stared at Silas, the tension stretched tight enough to snap. Then, the great warrior nodded once toward the south. "The bluecoats are coming from the north," Geronimo said in broken English, pointing past them toward where Sterling had been. "The snake Sterling rides with them. He is a scout for General Crook." Silas realized the twist then. Sterling wasn't just a mercenary. He was working for the government to hunt down the heir of the Apache resistance to prevent a new uprising. "Why tell us?" Silas asked. "Because," Geronimo turned his horse, "Chayton's son should not die in a cage." He threw a small leather pouch at Silas's feet. "Water," Geronimo said. "Do not stop until you cross the border." The war party vanished into the desert as silently as they had appeared. Silas looked at Niley. They were battered, bleeding, and homeless, but they were free. "Mexico?" Silas asked. Niley adjusted the baby, looking south. "Mexico." But as they took their first step, a shot rang out from the canyon rim behind them. Silas crumpled, a red bloom exploding on his back. Niley screamed. At the edge of the cliff, dusty and bloody but alive, stood Marcus Sterling. He held a long-range Whitworth rifle. He hadn't been buried. He had climbed the other side. "I told you, Thorne!" Sterling shouted, racking the bolt. "I have a job to do." Niley dropped to the dust, shielding Silas's body with her own. The baby screamed, the sound echoing across the mesa. "Don't move, Mrs. Thorne." Sterling's voice floated down from the ridge, calm and deadly. "I have a clear line of sight on the child. Stand up and walk away, and I'll let you live." Silas groaned beneath her, blood pooling dark and fast on the sandstone. "My rifle!" he rasped, his eyes losing focus. "Take it." The heavy Sharps buffalo rifle lay 3 feet away. "He will shoot the boy before I can lift it," Niley whispered, tears streaking the dust on her face. "He's arrogant," Silas coughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "He doesn't think, you know how, to use it." Niley looked up. Sterling was standing tall on the ridge, 200 yards away, confident in his victory. He was reloading slowly, savoring the moment. He saw a dying man and a helpless woman. He didn't see the wife of Silas Thorne. Niley took a breath. She didn't scramble. She didn't run. She moved with the fluid grace of a stalking cougar. She rolled, grabbing the heavy walnut stock of the Sharps. "Smart girl," Sterling laughed, raising his Whitworth. "But that gun kicks like a mule. You'll break your shoulder." Niley didn't answer. She rested the heavy barrel on a flat rock. She didn't aim for his chest. The wind was blowing cross-canyon, stronger up high. She remembered Silas's lesson. Aim for the shadow, not the man. She adjusted her aim to the left. Sterling's finger tightened on his trigger. Boom! The Sharps roared, kicking Niley back into the dirt. Through the clearing, smoke, she watched. On the ridge, Marcus Sterling looked down at his chest. A hole the size of a fist had appeared in his duster. The look on his face wasn't pain. It was pure shock. He dropped his rifle, swayed for a second, and then pitched forward, tumbling silently into the abyss of the canyon below. Niley scrambled back to Silas. He was pale, his eyes fluttering shut. "Did you get him?" he whispered. "I got him," she sobbed, pressing her hands to his wound. "Stay with me, Silas, you promised." "I'm tired, Niley. You do not get to rest," she ordered, her voice fierce. "We are going to Mexico. We are going to live. You are a father now. Fathers do not quit." Epilogue. 5 years later. The sun set over the Sierra Madre Mountains in Sonora, Mexico. On the porch of a small adobe ranch house, a man with a slight limp sat in a rocking chair, whittling a piece of cedar. His hair was grayer now, but the hardness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet peace. A 5-year-old boy with jet black hair and piercing blue eyes ran across the yard, chasing a dog. "Sam! Dinner!" a woman's voice called from inside. Gnarly stepped out, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked at the man in the chair. He looked back at her, and the love between them was a tangible thing, forged in fire and blood. "He runs fast," Silas said, smiling. "He runs like an Apache," Nayli smiled back, resting a hand on his shoulder. "No." Silas watched the boy stop to help a beetle across a stone. "He has his mother's heart, and that's what saved us." Silas Thorne, the man who once closed his heart to the world, stood up and walked inside to his family. The ghost was gone. Only the man remained. And that is the legend of Silas and Nayli Thorne, a story that proves that sometimes the only way to heal a broken past is to fight for a future you never expected. They say love is a battlefield, but in the Wild West, it was literally a war zone. What did you think of Nayli's final shot? Did Silas deserve a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a dark mystery coming next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.